fucking is this? Hey! I'm a police officer! Get over there! Hey! It's me, Serpico! Hey! Hey, I'm a police officer! Police officer! I'm an officer! I'm a police officer!
Jesus, Frank, how was I supposed to recognize you?
You stupid fuck.
Frank, I didn't know you.
You didn't know me! You fire without looking! You fire without a warning, without a fucking brain in your head!
Hey guys, welcome back to another podcast discussion, and this is on the 1973 movie Serpico, starring Al Pacino, directed by Sidney Lumet. Now, this is a film for me that kind of goes forgotten for Al Pacino, which is a real disappointment to me. I mean, even I forget about it. I think people definitely forget about it. You know, people like to look at him for Scarface, of course, you know, Heat, all these films he's done, Dog Day Afternoon, Carlito's Way. But Serpico for me was the other film other than Scarface where he just completely and utterly sunk into a character. Obviously he plays Frank Serpico, the real life story of the corruption within the New York City Police Department during his 11 years of service. And the real Frank Serpico was of course a whistleblower that led to a huge investigation into this corruption, and he's now considered a hero among, you know, the police and in the country. So of course it's an incredible true story, and I truly do believe it's one of the best police stories ever, this film. It really, really is. It's so true, it's so authentic, it really is. There's nothing Hollywood about this film. This is the crazy thing about 70s movies. There's something about the 70s, that decade, where Hollywood movies didn't have to be Hollywood movies. Hollywood movies could be gritty, realistic, dark, street level. There was just something so edgy and gritty about that decade. It was almost like filmmakers were just throwing it all out there and kind of discovering new forms of filmmaking and just being as authentic as possible, and that is now gone. But you look back and you watch films like this, which are so focused on being as uncompromising as possible, being as ground level as possible, being as realistic as possible in a lot of ways. You look back and you really treasure these films because they were just such standout films, and Serpico is one of them, of course. So the movie shows you the end at the start of the film, very much like Al Pacino's other movie, Carlito's Way. And I think that's such an interesting element to it. Something I'd like to see return in films. Maybe show us the end. Maybe have the balls to do that. Show us the end and then make us scratch our head how we're going to get there. Because it doesn't annoy you that you know the end. It doesn't. And that's when you know you're in quality filmmaking hands. When you can be so absorbed into the story and so swept up and so interested in how you're going to see what you already know is going to happen, but you still care just as much. I mean, that's an incredible skill. I think Sidney Lumet does incredibly well at a real long, epic film, Serpico is, because it really does feel like a journey you go on. You feel like it's the 11 years. You feel like you've watched his 11 years in the force. You know, you see him become a policeman. It makes it look great. It makes it look optimistic. He's very optimistic. And you just see the journey of slowly but surely, but enough time is dedicated in each element of him realising different things about corruption in the force, him changing as a person, him trying to keep it all together, him getting in relationships. But everything in here is so precise. We see just enough, but we feel like we've been through the ringer with Serpico. We feel like we've been on his entire journey, and that sort of thing really needed to work in this film. We really needed to feel the depth and the length of time and how in over his head Serpico gets. We had to feel that encompassing no escape from this police force that kind of becomes a prison, ironically enough, for Serpico. Frank's conviction and conscientious attitude and optimism is a delight to watch at the start of the film. Al Pacino, you know, he's usually playing the villain. He's usually playing someone you're either not supposed to like or who is an anti-hero. Serpico is not that. He's a good person. He really is a good person, and your heart goes out to him. He wants to see the police force change. He wants to treat criminals different. He wants to actually be a policeman, believe it or not. He believes in something which is long gone in this police department. You know, dedicated himself to the performance, the clothes, the appearance. He sunk into this performance, he embodied this performance. He created a look, a style for Serpico. He became Serpico. He was so dedicated to the role. And he wanted to make you feel every part of Serpico. He wanted to make you feel Serpico's passion. He wanted to make you feel Serpico's belief that the police force could be good. But he also wanted to make you feel that terrible realization that you've pushed so far to make things better, that you have just gone full circle and you're almost ending up just as bad as the corruption around you. And that's a real kind of messing with your head thing that happens to Serpico in this. You know, the paranoia starts to happen to him, and he starts to become short-tempered. He starts to become unkind to his partner. He starts to become everything he hated. But there's almost no option for him to turn out like that, because he's stuck in a web of everyone around him he can't trust. But a real sense of tension and confusion and losing who you are, losing your morals. It's a film about institutions, how much they can impose and stop change. You know, it very much is critical of institutions, such obviously the police. But you can apply it to many institutions now. You know, you can look at how this could happen, where everyone's so blasé corrupt that a good heart doesn't matter anymore. It's an inconvenience to have a good heart. Things are so normally corrupt. It's an inconvenience for Frank to want to change things. It's a film about how you can be very optimistic when you're younger, and then you can get into reality and realise you can't do everything, you can't change everything. And a lot of people don't want to change. Not everyone's as good as you. And Frank has to realise that. But Frank had guts, you know, even though he struggles and he realises that he can't do anything and he tries to even put himself out of it, he really did see it through, and eventually he did get the results. But dear God, you feel like he's not going to make it in this film. And you know, it doesn't present Frank Serpico as someone who was like, oh, I'm gonna do it, you know, at all times. He was falling apart at times. He was like, many times it shows him want to leave the force, many times. So the film is incredibly honest. It doesn't want to depict Serpico as this flawless individual who was so much better than what was going on around him. He was just good, and that was enough. He wasn't perfect. You feel that shakiness in his voice, you feel that tension, you feel that horror at what he's got himself into, and you see that young man go further and further along this cliff edge, this tightrope of just trying to walk this through and make it and believe there's somewhere he's going to get to in the end. But everything is just people just throwing rocks at him along this tightrope all along. Sidney Lumet gives the film time to breathe. Slow-paced films were all the rage in the 70s, imagine that. Incredibly slow-paced. You get to observe this character living his life. Again, you get to see those years accumulate. You get to know the character in his everyday life. You get to see him go to parties. You get to see him get pets. You get to see him have relationships. It's building that sense of empathy for the character. The scenes on the street are just so gritty. You couldn't recreate them today. There was just a way that 70s filmmakers did it. It was so nasty and it was so grimy, and you can taste the air and you can taste the street. It was just so ice cold and so tense and so frantic, and so much nervous energy on the streets. The scenes of Frank chasing criminals are just such a good pace and such a good frenzy to them. It just feels just very out of control what went on the streets, and just so believable. You know, everything you see in this film seems like it's a genuine police altercation on the streets in the 70s, and there's just an underlying sense of uneasiness throughout the whole film. Every scene will have more stakes to what we'd seen before, to the point where pretty much at the end of this film you're just on tenterhooks wondering how Serpico's going to get screwed over, how he's going to survive, because the situation's imploding in on itself. Everyone's performance is fantastic. You know, Al Pacino's superiors who just aren't relating to his struggle and are just trying to handle this, but you don't know if they're corrupt too, and you don't know who you can trust in the film, and you feel like Serpico, where you don't know, you don't like anyone in the film really other than Serpico. It feels like such a enclosed web of corruption, where even if there are good people there, maybe they're not as good as Serpico, maybe they're bad really. It's just, you know, everyone's so shameless in this. Just that constant journey of Al Pacino getting more and more frustrated, more and more out of control. And I feel like what makes it so relatable is that if you were as dedicated as Frank, if you were in this situation, you'd probably be how he was. You know, he got frustrated, he lashed out, but only because of what was being done to him. A performance no one should forget, and no one should forget the man, Frank Serpico, who is still alive, in his 80s now, still doing work, you know, still holding on to hope, you know, still fighting the good fight. You know, and Serpico is a great film in relating to your own life. You should stand up for what you believe in, for good. Maybe not to this level where you end up about to die because of it, but, you know, believe in what you believe in and don't let everyone around you who has given up their morals to dictate what you do. There is a lot to learn from Serpico, a lot of conviction and fight to the man and to the story, and it's just an incredible story. It really is a sensational story. And of course Sidney Lumet tells it in such an absorbing, such a big time way, and you know, this is a film that can never be made today again, and a film there's not many like even back here. It really is a standalone achievement, and people need to watch this more because it's not really mentioned in Al Pacino's films, but it is a stunning piece of work. What do you guys think of Serpico? Click on another discussion on the screen now of another Al Pacino movie. I also do other gangster discussions on this channel, other movie geek discussions. If you like the sound of that and you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing. I'll see you guys next time.